A bastard shall dwell, it's someone born out of wedlock or incest. A bastard shall dwell in Ashdod, and I will cut off the pride of the Philistines. And here's a Hebrew here. May be rendered a stranger as well as a bastard in the Greek, in the Septuagint, which renders the sense more obvious. And I will cut off the pride of the Philistines, and so forth. Whence then this change? We are led to seek and naturally expect to find some ground for it. It's probably talking about something up here. Yeah. And accordingly, the next verse unfolds the reason and explains the occasion of this change in the council of heaven. A change resting not on their own merits but on divine mercy. For such a construction will this verse bear quite as well as the one usually put upon it. And this construction is far more in unison with the context than the received one. Okay. With scarcely any alteration in translation, the words, even as they stand, admit of a very different acceptance from that in which they are commonly taken. Instead of being a figurative expression borrowed from the rescuing its prey from the jaws of a lion, in which sense the Jews take it as a promise to themselves of deliverance from the enemies. The words more literally taken will convey the promise of mercy and redemption to the remaining Gentiles, whose sin and pollution are to be taken away, who are to be reclaimed to the worship of the true God, and admitted to a full participation in all the blessings promised to Israel by the coming of the Messiah. Okay, so it was handed to them, it was offered to them because the Jews rejected him. The Gentiles were esteemed polluted by eating things unclean, which were prohibited to the Jews. This all kosher, right? Certain animals, things strangled, and the blood in particular were among the forbidden foods. The new covenant removed this prohibition, thereby taking away the pollution from between its teeth, as it ceased to be a cause of pollution. Now, this is in accordance with Peter's vision. The command given to St. Peter, Acts 10:14, to kill and eat, because he had this vision that this table came down and had this cloth on it and had all these animals, and he's told to eat. Go find them and cook them up, eat them up. But he said, no, I don't need those. I'm kosher, I can't do that. And this messenger of God, or the angel of God, or even maybe Christ himself. I don't know. It's not right. Oh yeah. Okay, let's say maybe it's because sometimes Christ is actually the angel, the messenger, right? Sometimes referred to as that. So it said, right? So he says, go eat, because God has made them all clean. But he's stubborn and said, no, I'm kosher. I don't do that. And so he ended up relenting. So he said, yeah, I'll go do it. And he was also told, go and meet this Gentile, the centurion, or this Roman at such and such a house, because he wants to convert to the faith. He goes, oh no, I don't associate with him. We never associate with them. We don't talk to them, don't walk around with them. Don't even sit in the same place and eat food with them. All this sort of stuff, right? No. But then he relented eventually and went and did it. Okay? And converted this Roman to their faith. Okay? So, when it says that they are full of sin and polluted, okay, they were corrupted by this food, this unclean food like pork and all that sort of stuff in that time that they used to indulge in, right? And so forth. Okay, so the command given to St. Peter, Acts 10:14, to kill and eat when all manner of food was presented to him, was expressively received by him as a commandment to preach the gospel to the Gentiles, or to admit them into the Messiah's kingdom. And this admission was accompanied with such prohibition, nor was it subsequently given. Eating things sacrificed to idols was another cause of pollution, which the new covenant removed by taking away the cause and the abolition of idolatry. This literal fulfillment of the words of the prophecy may, however, be figuratively understood to foreshow the remission of sins through Christ and the admission of the heathen nations to the hopes of everlasting life founded on the gospel. The only change required in the English version is to read but for and which are expressed alike by the Hebrew. And to understand, as abominations in the sense most appropriate to it, as alluding to the worship of idols. And we have the sense already expressed, which perfectly harmonizes with the context. Whereas, taken in the other sense, what becomes of the antithesis? Who is he that is left that shall be for our God and as a chief in Judah? Surely it cannot be the Jew, who shall be as a Jew. But the next words are decisive, declaring that Ekron and the Jebusite, both Gentiles, are here intended, and Ekron as a Jebusite. This mode of rendering leaves indeed the force of these words rather ambiguous, but there can be no intelligible sense put upon the but that of in like manner as, or as well as, that is Ekron as well as the Jebusite shall both be as governors in Judah. Here's verse 8 in the Hebrew. And I will encamp about mine house because of the army, or I will encamp about my house, because of him that passes by, and because of him that returns, and no oppressor shall pass through them any more. For now I have seen with mine eyes. It is not certain, though probable, from 1 Samuel 26, 5-7, that the Jews had entrenched camps. If so, the passage would be clearer by rendering I will entrench instead of encamp. Through the sense of is sufficiently obvious, as meaning to afford protection against the army. The house of God, to which protection is promised, is his temple, figuratively denoting true religion purified from idolatry. The great spiritual adversary constantly warring with Israel, and as we learn from Scripture, frequently prevailing, which is probably the warfare here alluded to. But if taken literally, this passage conveys the promise that the Messiah's kingdom should put an end to oppression and injustice. The exact import of the expression, for now I have seen with mine eyes, is not very evident, but may imply God's foreseeing the unfitness of the Jews to receive a spiritual Messiah, who, in consequence of their rejection of him, would be given to the Gentiles. Okay. So he became their Messiah. They became part of him, part in him. They had their option to embrace the grace, the mercy, salvation, him being their Redeemer, and so forth. Here's the Hebrew here, verse 9. Rejoice greatly, daughter of Zion. Shout, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, thy king cometh unto thee. He is just in having salvation, lovely and riding upon an ass, or a mule donkey cross, okay, or mule horse cross. Oh, no, mule donkey cross, right? And a colt, the foal of an ass. So he's not coming on someone's ass, right? Some people go, oh, he's riding on someone's ass. Yeah, silly, right? Really silly. Okay. Because this Hillman guy, he says, oh, Jesus was in a park at 4 a.m. with this kid and all this stuff, yelling, oh, I'm not a molester. It's all rubbish, right? The guy's on something. It's on some wacky weed or something, right? Yeah. The scriptures in those old dead languages, Galilean, Aramaic, or even that Hebrew, original Hebrew, or even the Syriac, they don't say that, they don't translate as that. Ask any Easterner that can, is native born speaker, and they'll tell you, nah, the guy's on some really good coke or something, He's sniffing too much coke or something. There is no ambiguity in the purport of this voice, which is the coming of the Messiah, as all commentators allow. But the author could in no wise agree with Loth and others that this verse is a rhapsodical digression from the subject of the rest of the chapter, in which the prophet, being wrought up to the highest pitch of enthusiasm, breaks off from the immediate object of his vision to foretell the coming of the Messiah, and then returns back to his former subject. On the contrary, the author can see nothing like digression here, but one connected and consistent object throughout, this verse being the keystone of the arch, which binds together those who precede and those which follow it, forming the whole into one united and compact body. Instead of a digression from the subject, the author regards this verse as a clue to guide us through the labyrinth by fixing and determining the subject of all the rest. Okay. Behold, thy kingdom cometh unto thee. There's the Hebrew there. is really the future tense, literally shall come, and changing it to the present, cometh, seems unnecessary if it does not in some degree interfere with the chronological order of the events predicted afterwards. Just in having salvation. This is certainly an ambiguous rendering of the past participle of the verb to save, which literally signifies being saved, and the emphatic himself, following it more strongly, marks the sense as having obtained salvation himself. Riding on an ass, and a colt, the foal of an ass. The connective, and should certainly be rendered here by even or to wit, and not by and, which makes it appear that the Messiah was to ride upon two asses, or two donkeys, right? Two mules or whatever, two donkeys. Yeah, how do you ride on two of them? You're either going to be on the back of one and your feet on the other one, right? Or you can do the splits and one leg's on one side of one donkey, or whatever, colt, and the other leg's on the other side. Okay. It'd be like a really flexible Jean-Claude Van Damme. Okay, riding this ass or donkey around. Okay, there's plenty more here. Conjunction with the Hebrew. Goes into great detail. Continues. Okay, and here's the Rabbi's exposition. And reply, chapter 9, as he concluded that the object of the Christian who thinks he sees in this prophecy a clear prediction of the coming of Jesus Christ is to learn in what manner it is expounded by the Jews. It appears to the author that the simplest way in which he can reply will be to lay before him what he conceives to be the proper translation and interpretation. In doing this, it will be unnecessary to offer any further explanation or exposition beyond what may be given in the form of comment on the translation, while he is at liberty to conclude with regard to those passages. When no comment or explanation is offered, not assertedly that he assents, this author assents to his interpretation, but merely that the author acquiesces in the reasons he assigns for his dissent, or that his anticipation of his argument has rendered its repetition superfluous, as in the case in verses 9 and 10. The following is his mode of translating this chapter and expounding it. Zechariah chapter 9, verse 1. The burden of the word of the Lord on the land of Hadrach in Damascus, his residence, for to the Lord will be the eye of man, and particularly that of all the tribes of Israel. This prophecy is directed against a king named Hadrach, and against Damascus, his residence. That's where he's living, right? According to some who have visited Syria, there is to this day near the desert a village bearing the name of that king, whose inhabitants assert that formerly a large district about it that constituted a powerful kingdom was called by the same name. For to the Lord, saith the prophet, will be the eye of man, agreeably to what he further declares, that the extermination of the wicked will precede the turning to God, the eyes of the residue of man. Verse 2, don't go through all of that, explaining it. And continues explaining it, what it actually is written as when translated into the English correctly, and what it actually means. Continues. He's looking at Exodus chapter 24, verse 8, then verse 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16, and 17, last of all. Okay, remarks on the Rabbi's exposition. So somebody else is making their remarks on that rabbi's exposition. Okay, that the rabbi's answer disappointed this particular person, being neither so full nor so forcible as he expected. But if he, as a Jew, be satisfied, it is not for me as a Christian to complain. There are, moreover, certain points of coincidence in our translation, in which the acquiescence of the, how do you say that? Acquiescence of the rabbi as a distinguished Hebrew scholar is truly gratifying, while there are also some points of disagreement in which this particular person is inclined to relinquish his own in favour of the rabbi's translation. He proposed, says briefly, to avert to each, but there is one circumstance that first deserves to be noticed, in which, however singular it may appear, might yet have been expected. It is this, that whenever he ventured to differ from Christian commentators, there he also is at issue with the rabbi. Now, having formerly stated that their received translation is chiefly founded on the Masoretic punctuation, which is Jewish, a coincidence was naturally to be looked for between the Jews' exposition and that which is in a great measure borrowed from it. And accordingly, such is the case, the Jews' exposition differing from that of our own commentators, principally on those points where the latter discover allusions to Christ. These, the Jew, of course, nowhere finds. Now, what the Jew nowhere perceives, and the Christian only here and there, as it were, incidentally, this particular writer maintains to be wholly and solely the subject of these chapters. This is at least a broad and well-marked line of distinction. But here, this person unfortunately stands alone, having Christian as well as Jews opposed to him. Christians as well as Jews opposed to him. Even the Jew allows that the subject of the latter part of this prophecy is the Messiah and his kingdom. But if Christ be the Messiah, as the Christian must admit, then is Christianity his kingdom and the subject of the prophecy. So much for the state of the Christian. The first point of disagreement between this person and the rabbi is unconnected with the punctuation and is one of little importance to the Christian, beyond what it may derive from the concurrence of his opponents. The rabbi and Dr. Blaney agree in regarding Hadrach in the first verse as the name of a prince instead of a city or state. The rabbi gives no authority for his opinion, and Dr. Blaney supports his by the conjecture that Rehob, spoken of in 2 Samuel 8:3, who is by Josephus named, this looks like it's in the Greek, or maybe the prince alluded to. Now, since the avowed reason for resorting to this supposition is the want of a city of this name, this person would venture to suggest that Aradas bears quite as much resemblance to Hadrach as this one does. And to Aradas was annexed a considerable district, and he goes on and on. Okay, giving his reasons. Yeah. Why he's at odds with him, doesn't agree with him. Okay. Take one, continue. Okay, we continue from where we left off, where this Christian person refutes or makes remarks on what the rabbi has stated. Yeah? This is from a Christian point of view. His opinions, his views, and so forth. And here's here the triumph of Christianity over paganism is no victory, and the rapid propagation of the gospel no success. In verse 12, the stronghold, which is evidently the same as the prison house, called in the preceding verse the pit without water, and which the rabbi allows to be a state of captivity, is here somewhat abruptly transformed into a place of shelter and protection. Verse 15. The rabbi's idea that the prophet here uses the term sling stones in derision as an appellative for the enemies of Israel, while he applies to themselves in the next verse the term precious stones, appears to this particular person that he must acknowledge somewhat novel and, or maybe new. And as he disputes that translation of the next verse altogether, he cannot acquiesce in such an explanation of this. With regard to the rendering of this in the Hebrew, in the same verse, which he has considered as a personal pronoun, they, instead of the verb to make a noise, he believes the rabbis, upon reconsidering the passage, to be the more correct translation. But these verbal differences, however they may interest the Hebrew scholar, are of trivial importance as regarding the grand question between the two, namely whether the accomplishment of the predictions contained in the chapter ceases before we arrive at verse 9, which is admitted to announce the coming of the Messiah. Upon this point, then this person pleads the general issue. If he succeeds in showing that every part of the prophecy in the following chapters, as well as the present, has been clearly accomplished in the leading events of the history of Christianity, then he gains his cause. If he fails to do so, let the verdict go for the Jew or the rabbi. Okay, so what we understand is that basically the rabbi is telling him that, this is what it actually says in the Hebrew, okay, and also maybe suggesting the Jewish mindset as well, right? How they think, how they interpret it, basically, how they. It's like it's an expression, it's an idiom, right? And he's trying to get it across to this person, the Christian, who may have it all wrong because somebody's translated it wrong, okay? Because maybe they're using the Masoretic text where it's got the vowels added and then these points. Okay, so he's trying to get across to him, hey, this is what it actually means. But this guy being a Christian, right? He's saying, oh yeah, that's all good, but he's not really, doesn't give a toss really about what. Well, he does regard what the rabbi says, but he's in defence of his Christianity, right? Okay, so he's saying, oh no, I don't agree. It doesn't mean that. Well, this is stuff, without realizing that, hey, it's coming from the Jewish language. It's coming from the Hebrew. Okay, so it means something completely different. Maybe this guy is translating from a Greek version, okay, Septuagint or something like that. So that's why there's a difference there. Yeah. So he's saying, oh no, I don't agree with that. Etc. Okay. One is probably, the rabbi is probably translating from the Jewish, the Hebrew. Yeah, the Hebrew. Okay. Being a native born speaker of it, fluent in it. Whereas this guy's translating from his study of the Greek. Yeah, he probably doesn't speak Greek, but he's probably well versed in it. Yeah, or maybe he knows the modern Greek or something like that. So that's the difference between the two, we believe. Okay, and that's the problem there. Okay, Zechariah chapter 10. Is this the rabbi again? Yeah, it looks like it's the rabbi again. Not too sure on that one though. We're pretty certain it is. And here's the notes to chapter 10, the Hebrew and probably the correct translation. And the rabbi's reply and the author's remarks upon it. Contending as the Jew does that no part of the prophecy relating to the Messiah's kingdom has yet been accomplished, he cannot reasonably be expected to offer a particular interpretation of what, according to his view, is still unfulfilled. And accordingly, his remarks on this chapter are restricted to an occasional correction of the received translation. and a few short explanatory notes while his reply to his exposition, the Christians, if reply it can be called, may be compromised in one short sentence, namely that he considers the whole unaccomplished and rejects altogether the spiritual exposition, admitting none but the literal. In answer to this, the rabbi has to observe that the literal acceptation has already in some instances been shown to be impossible, and will hereafter be so in many more, while the figurative exposition offered is in perfect accordance with the style and language of prophecy in general, and is uniform and consistent throughout. As the rabbi is fully acquiesces, and it's just remarks on the rabbi's reply. Okay, maybe it's this Christian guy still carrying on.